17-year-old Bernadette Walker had dreams bigger than the small English town she grew up in. A bright, creative girl who saw the world through the lens of her camera. Bea was ready to build a future far away from the chaos of her family home. But when she confided a dark secret to the people she trusted most, the ones who should have protected her turned into her greatest threat. Within days, Bea would vanish without a trace. No witnesses, nobody, just a tangled web of lies, betrayal, and heartbreak that left an entire community asking, how could a family destroy its own? This is the chilling story of Bernadette Walker and the betrayal that silenced her forever. Welcome. This is Crime Uncovered, where every case has a story, and the truth is often stranger and darker than fiction. If you haven't subscribed yet, kindly do so to stay updated on the latest crimes we uncover. Bernadette Walker was born on December 13, 2002, in the historic city of Peterborough, Cambridgeshire, England. From her earliest days, Bea, as she was affectionately known, displayed a sensitivity and creativity that set her apart. She was the kind of child who found wonder in the smallest details. A wildflower growing through a crack in the pavement, the way light fell across an empty field. It was clear early on that Bea saw the world differently, through a lens of beauty and curiosity that others often missed. Raised by her mother, Sarah Walker, Bea's life at home was far from stable. Her father was absent from her life, and Sarah juggled raising Bea along with her other children, each from different relationships. Yet Bea remained resilient. She was shy around strangers but blossomed in the company of those she trusted. Her laughter was contagious, her loyalty unbreakable. Photography became Bea's sanctuary. It wasn't just a hobby. It was her voice, her way of capturing the emotions and stories she couldn't always express out loud. Wherever she went, her camera was never far behind. After finishing high school, Bea took a major step toward her dreams by enrolling in Peterborough College to study photography formally. She had ambitions beyond the modest streets of Peterborough. She dreamed of moving to the United States, pursuing a career in photography, and living a life filled with creativity and independence. Outside of her passion for art, Bea loved social media, using it as a way to connect with friends and express herself more freely than she could at home. She also cherished quieter hobbies like knitting, a skill lovingly taught to her by her grandmother, with whom she shared a particularly strong bond. Bea was known to knit gifts for friends and family, small acts of love woven into every stitch. Despite her vibrant spirit, Bea grew up in a home where chaos was the norm. Her mother Sarah had 6 children from previous relationships before moving in with Scott Walker, the man who would become a dark and dominating presence in Bea's life. Scott, who had a disturbing history of emotional abuse and control over his previous partners, quickly inserted himself into the Walker family dynamic. Though Sarah and Scott never officially married, Sarah legally changed her surname and that of her children to Walker, signaling a commitment that went beyond paperwork. Together, Sarah and Scott would go on to have 4 more children, bringing the total to 10 kids crammed into a modest 5-bedroom house. To the outside world, they were just another big family trying to make ends meet. But inside the Walker home, the reality was far more sinister. Control, surveillance, and manipulation ruled their lives. Scott Walker installed security cameras throughout the house, even in the bathrooms, under the guise of monitoring the children. He was a man obsessed with power, and his dominance over the household was absolute. His abuse was not just physical. It was emotional, psychological, and deeply scarring. For Bea, the home that should have been her refuge became a prison. And yet, through it all, she clung to her dreams. She smiled for her friends, posted her photos online, and knitted gifts for her loved ones, holding on to any shred of normalcy she could find in a world that seemed determined to crush her light. She was a light in a dark world, and it was that light so bright, so rare, that would ultimately make her a target. Bernadette Bea Walker was known by everyone who loved her as sweet, honest, and trusting, perhaps too trusting for her own good. She had a quiet, calming presence and a kind heart that made people feel safe around her. Bea shared a special bond with her siblings and an especially close relationship with her grandmother, who taught her to knit and nurtured her creative passions. Despite the chaos of her home life, Bee carved out small spaces of joy. Photography was her true love, an art form where she could capture glimpses of beauty beyond the walls she lived behind. She also found comfort in her knitting and in the friendships she built online. Bee believed deeply in family. She trusted her mother, Sarah Walker. She trusted Scott Walker, the man she called her dad. She trusted them to protect her. But trust, once misplaced, can be fatal. And for Bee, the trust she so freely gave would cost her everything. By mid-2020, the Walker house had become a pressure cooker of secrets, fear, and manipulation. The walls of the 5-bedroom home, already cramped with 10 children, hid years of emotional neglect and unchecked abuse. At the center of it all was Scott Walker, who ruled the household with an invisible but iron grip. Scott's control wasn't just psychological, it was physical and constant. He installed hidden surveillance cameras throughout the house, even inside the bathrooms, claiming they were there to catch the kids hiding candy wrappers. But everyone knew deep down that wasn't the real reason. It was about domination. It was about stripping away privacy and dignity, especially from the most vulnerable. Bee lived under Scott's watchful, predatory eye. She was monitored, manipulated, and abused, trapped in a house where even the smallest act of defiance felt dangerous. Sarah Walker, Bee's mother, did nothing to stop it. Whether it was fear, selfishness, or blind loyalty, Sarah didn't protect her daughter. And when Bee, desperate and terrified, finally found the courage to confide in her mother about the years of sexual abuse she had suffered, she was met not with comfort, but with a chilling threat. Sarah told Bee that if she ever went to the police, she would kill her. Bee was isolated, betrayed by the two people who should have fought for her. And just days later, she would vanish without a trace. On the evening of July 17, 2020, Scott Walker drove 17-year-old Bee to his parents' home in Rington. She wore her favorite black clothes, a blue denim jacket, and her signature thick-framed black glasses, items that made her feel hidden, safe. But nothing about that night was safe. During the car ride, without warning, Scott took Bee's phone away. He offered no explanation. To Bee, it must have been terrifying. A sudden loss of her only way to reach out for help. It was a small act that would later loom large in the investigation. A chilling step in cutting her off from the world. Bee stayed overnight at Scott's parents' home, but something about her was different. Scott's parents would later testify that Bee seemed visibly upset when she arrived. Withdrawn, nervous, as if she knew that something terrible was about to happen, but had nowhere left to run. The next morning, on July 18th, Scott returned to pick her up. What happened next would be the start of an elaborate lie. According to Scott's story, as they drove near Skaters Way, an isolated stretch of land outside Peterborough, Bee suddenly threw open the car door and bolted. He claimed he tried to chase after her but couldn't keep up. He said he returned home alone, exhausted and shaken. When Sarah saw Scott arrive home later that day, she immediately noticed something was wrong. He looked pale, drained, on the verge of tears. But in a household built on fear and silence, Sarah asked no questions. More disturbingly, despite Bee's disappearance, Sarah did nothing. She didn't call the police that night. She didn't report her daughter missing the next morning. She didn't even alert anyone by the following day. 3 agonizing days passed before Sarah finally called authorities. By then, whatever had happened to Bee was already buried beneath layers of lies, and possibly something far worse. When police searched the Walker home after Bee's disappearance, they found no trace of her, no signs of a struggle, no signs that she had packed or left voluntarily. Just an unsettling, heavy silence, and a family with too many unanswered questions. Investigators quickly turned their attention to the two people who should have been the most desperate to find Bee: Scott and Sarah Walker. Instead, what they uncovered was a timeline that reeked of deceit. First, they reviewed the phone records. July 18th, 11:23 a.m. to 12:54 p.m. Scott's phone had been switched off for nearly 90 minutes. Right in the window when Bee supposedly ran away near Skaters Way. Why would a man searching for a missing teenager turn off his phone? The timing was too perfect and far too suspicious. But there was more. Cell tower data placed both Scott and Sarah making repeated trips to a locked garage belonging to Scott's parents in the days immediately following B's disappearance. A place far removed from their home. A place where no one would think to look. When detectives finally obtained a warrant and searched the garage, what they found was chilling. B's rucksack. Abandoned. Forgotten. Inside the bag was something even more devastating. A small diary, worn from use, filled with B's handwritten entries. One particular entry stopped investigators cold. Told my mom about my dad and the abuse. She lied to me and said she would kill me if I told the police. In her own words, B had laid bare the terror she lived with every day. The betrayal, the fear, the desperate, flickering hope that maybe, just maybe, someone would save her. No one had. And now, her voice could only speak from pages left behind. When police entered the Walker home after B's disappearance, they were met with an eerie kind of emptiness. No signs of a struggle. No packed bags suggesting B had run away. No broken furniture. Just a heavy silence. And a family acting far too calm for the circumstances. Something was very wrong. In cases of missing teens, parents are usually frantic, desperate for answers. But Sarah and Scott Walker showed none of the urgency investigators expected. Their behavior raised immediate suspicions, and when detectives pulled their phone records, the timeline they uncovered sent a chill down everyone's spine. On July 18th, between 11:23 a.m. and 12:54 p.m., the exact window when B was last seen, Scott's phone was mysteriously switched off for nearly 90 minutes. Why would someone searching for a missing teenager turn off their phone during the most critical time? The answer seemed obvious. Scott wasn't searching for B at all. Investigators dug deeper. Cell tower records showed that after B's disappearance, Scott and Sarah had made multiple visits. Not home, not to search parties, but to a locked garage belonging to Scott's parents. Suspicious, detectives obtained a warrant to search the garage. Inside, tucked away in a dusty corner, they found B's rucksack, left behind, abandoned like an afterthought. But it was what was inside the rucksack that broke the case wide open. B's diary. In between pages of teenage hopes and dreams was a chilling entry. Told my mom about my dad and the abuse. She lied to me and said she would kill me if I told the police. It was B's final testimony. Her words, scribbled in fear and betrayal, told the story she would never get the chance to speak aloud. And they confirmed the investigators' worst fears. B hadn't run away. She had been silenced by the very people who should have protected her. As detectives peeled back the layers of B's disappearance, a disturbing pattern emerged. A web of manipulation, fear, and betrayal that had been carefully hidden behind the walls of the Walker household. It started with B's friends. One by one, they came forward to share what B had confided in them. Pieces of a puzzle that, when assembled, painted a grim and devastating picture. B had told them about Scott, about the abuse, about the fear that kept her silent for so long. Text messages B had sent in the weeks before her disappearance corroborated their testimonies. She hinted at the things she was too afraid to say outright, the dread she lived with daily. Her diary echoed the same cries for help. Pages filled with quiet suffering, betrayal, and desperate hope that someone, someday, might believe her. But perhaps the most chilling piece of evidence didn't come from B's private writings. It came from a public place, Facebook, months before B vanished, when she had proudly updated her relationship status to in a relationship with her boyfriend, Luke. It should have been a joyful, innocent moment, a normal step for a teenager beginning to carve out a life of her own. Instead, Scott Walker left a comment beneath her post that sent shivers down investigators' spines. "Any boy who kisses you better have an image of me in your head." Beneath the comment was a black and white photo of Scott himself, staring directly into the camera. It was possessive. It was chilling. It was a threat disguised as a joke. A sick reminder that even in public, Scott wanted B, and everyone else, to know she wasn't free. She was his possession. To the detectives, it was clear B hadn't lived in a home. She had lived in a prison. And when she finally found the courage to speak out, the walls of that prison closed in on her for good. By September 2020, the fragile web of lies that Scott and Sarah Walker had spun was crumbling under the weight of mounting evidence. Police had their timeline. They had the damning diary. They had testimony from B's friends. And they had the chilling social media evidence that made Scott's obsession all too clear. On September 14, 2020, Scott and Sarah were finally arrested. The charges were serious. Scott was charged with the murder of Bernadette B. Walker. Both Scott and Sarah were charged with perverting the course of justice. It was a shocking moment for the community. Two people who had publicly played the grieving parents were now exposed as the ones responsible for B's disappearance and presumed death. Despite the enormous circumstantial evidence stacked against them, the battle inside the courtroom was tense. Sarah admitted to one horrifying truth. She had sent fake messages from B's phone after her disappearance, trying to make it look like B was still alive, trying to buy time. But she continued to deny any involvement in her daughter's death. She maintained that she was misled, a desperate mother covering for a runaway teenager. Scott, unsurprisingly, clung to his well-worn lie. He insisted B had simply opened the car door and run off. No confrontation, no violence, just a teenager vanishing into thin air. But the jury didn't buy it. The forensic timeline, the digital manipulation, the garage visits, the eerie Facebook comment. It all painted a chillingly clear picture. Scott wasn't a grieving father. He was a predator. And Sarah, whether out of fear, loyalty, or selfishness, had chosen to protect him instead of protecting her own daughter. On July 23, 2021, justice caught up. Scott Walker was found guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 32 years behind bars. Sarah Walker was convicted of perverting the course of justice. She received a 6-year prison sentence. Far less time, but enough to mark her betrayal forever. Yet, even with the guilty verdicts, a cruel and painful mystery lingered. Where was B? Her body was never found. No grave, no farewell. Just an unbearable void where a beautiful, creative young life had once been. And for B's family, true closure remained heartbreakingly out of reach. In the aftermath of Scott Walker's conviction, there was still one last hope for answers. Helen's Law. Passed in 2020, Helen's Law, officially known as the Prisoner's Disclosure of Information About Victims Act, was designed to deny parole to murderers who refused to reveal the whereabouts of their victims' bodies. It was a beacon of hope for families like B's, a way to compel killers to finally give up their last, cruel power over the dead. Scott was subject to Helen's Law. If he ever wanted a chance at freedom, he would have to tell the truth. Tell authorities where he hid B. Give her family the dignity of a proper goodbye. But Scott Walker, even behind bars, remained defiant. He never confessed. He never gave up the location. He chose silence, a final act of cruelty against the girl who had trusted him as a father. And then the chance for answers was snuffed out forever. On December 22, 2023, Scott Walker died unexpectedly inside HM Prison Full Sutton at the age of 53. With his death, whatever truth he held inside him, the truth about B's final moments, where he left her, what really happened on that terrible day, died too. The secret of B's fate was buried alongside the man who stole her life. Meanwhile, Sarah Walker, B's own mother, who helped orchestrate the cover-up, remains alive. She is set to be released from prison in 2027, free to walk the streets again, free to start a new chapter. And B remains lost, voiceless, unseen, a bright spirit trapped in an endless, unanswered nightmare. A daughter betrayed not just by her abuser, but by the very people who should have fought to save her. B's surviving siblings, especially Anthony, have fought tirelessly to keep her memory alive and seek the closure they so desperately need. Despite extensive searches using drones, K-9 units, and community efforts, B's remains have never been found. Detective Justine Jenkins, who worked on the case, said, "We may never know exactly what Scott did, but we know enough to understand that B deserved so much better. And that's the unbearable truth. B trusted her mother. She trusted Scott. She trusted that love would protect her. In the end, it was that trust that cost her everything. Bernadette B. Walker was more than a headline. She was a dreamer, an artist, a young woman whose life was stolen by the very people she trusted most. Her story is a brutal reminder that evil doesn't always lurk in the shadows. Sometimes it sits across the dinner table. Sometimes it wears a familiar face. If you or someone you know is facing abuse, speak up. Seek help. Silence only empowers the monsters among us. We owe it to B, and to all victims, to keep telling these stories, because the truth must never stay buried. Every victim deserves their story told. Subscribe to Crime Uncovered and help keep their memory alive. Until next time, keep questioning everything.